Hello, everybody, and the time has come for the 2025 Year in Advance Oscar predictions. So, I have spent quite a lot of time putting these together, and I don't want to waste too much of your time at the very beginning. I will say one last thing we got to say before we officially say goodbye to last year's awards season. We just recently got the winners for the AC Eddie Awards, and those were Emilia Perez and Wicked. Gosh, AC Eddie, so unhelpful. Would have been so unhelpful if they had been announced before the Oscars. I probably would have switched my prediction to Wicked if I had gotten those winners in advance. And the fact that one of the very last awards of this season ends up going to Emilia Perez, not a fan of that decision. But we can officially put last year's season to bed and look forward to next year, because the Oscars are. It was just announced this morning that Conan O'Brien is coming back to host next year's Oscars. And they never announce the host this far in advance, so they must have really liked him. So, when it comes to figuring out what's going to be an awards contender next year, it's a very difficult process. It is a lot of guesswork. It is largely just for fun. And last year's Year in Advance predictions, I got very wrong. I was way off. There were a lot of movies like Megalopolis, Horizon, An American Saga, Mickey 17 I thought would be a thing, and that got pushed, and now we know that isn't a thing. I was very sold on a lot of movies, and there were a lot of movies that came out of nowhere. I at least was vaguely aware of Anora and Emilia Perez, but no one really knew that The Brutalist was coming. People thought A Complete Unknown would come out the following year. They were still in the middle of filming it, and the only case where a movie comes out earlier than you think it's going to. And of course, no one would have dared predicted a body horror movie to get into Best Picture. So there were a lot of things that came out of absolutely nowhere last year. And I'm referring to that season as last year already. I'm trying to get into this new mentality of new year, new season. I know New Year's Day is technically January 1st, but to me it's not until the day after the Oscars. That's when everything really gets going. Also, one last thing. Regarding my Year in Advance predictions last year, even though I got a lot of stuff wrong, I was one of the few people who did not have faith in Joker Folie à Deux. And I was also one of the few people who did have faith in Wicked as an above-the-line contender. I got comments of people that were like, I can't believe you're predicting Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande to get nominated, but you didn't predict Lady Gaga to get nominated for Joker. You're an idiot. I actually am kind of validated with that one, even if I got a lot of other things wrong. So, let's begin with the category that is going to be new this year, Best Casting. Now, because there's no real precedent for this category before, other than the BAFTA, which is very difficult to predict and very all over the place, I decided I'm going to treat this category sort of as if it's an ensemble award, an ensemble SAG thing. And obviously it's not that, but I don't really know how to judge it otherwise. I'll have to wait to see what they do this first year. And I went with a lot of movies that are in my Best Picture predictions. And this is convenient because otherwise the first batch of movies I would talk about are the animated movies, and now I'm going to start off by talking about the movies that are for sure going to be, the movies that are perceived at least as being across-the-board contenders. So, first and foremost, any conversation about Year in Advance Oscar predictions this year has to begin with One Battle After Another. This movie is so far ahead of everything else based on the simple fact that it is directed by Paul Thomas Anderson and it stars Leonardo DiCaprio. Those two people have such a great track record with Oscar. Anderson's last two movies were nominated for Picture, Director, and Screenplay, and Leo DiCaprio, he literally has not been in a film that wasn't nominated for Best Picture since Great Gatsby in 2013. He's very choosy about his projects, and now he's working with PTA, so it is hard to imagine this one being a failure. This one is going to be a big deal. I don't know too much about it, but I know it's based on a book, and that book is going to be the very first one in my Oscar Book Club series, which I want to bring back. So after that one, we then have Michael, which is a biopic about Michael Jackson, starring his nephew, Jafar Jackson. So this is one of the awards contenders that people are really excited about. Obviously, last year with The Complete Unknown, the Oscars can't resist a good music biopic. And this one is going to get a lot of attention on it. One movie that I didn't mention here is, I'm blanking on the name, but there's a movie where Jeremy Allen White plays Bruce Springsteen. And I was tempted to go for it, but I was like, you know what? I think that's almost too similar to A Complete Unknown. Remember the year that we had a Rocket Man, and it was the year after Bohemian Rhapsody, and a lot of voters were like, we don't want to go for this because it's the same thing, even if that movie was better? I think it's going to be sort of a similar thing. And plus, you don't know which of these movies are going to hit and which one of these are going to miss. But anyway, Michael is just different enough. It's going to get attention. Pretty confident about Michael. And next up, we have Hamnet with an N, very important. This is based on a book chronicling William Shakespeare's mourning his son, Hamnet, and eventually being inspired to write the play that is almost that name, but with one letter changed. This is another book I'm going to read. Directed by Chloe Zhao. This is her true follow-up to Nomadland because Eternals doesn't really count. And so a lot of people are really excited about this one, and I am too. Highest to Lowest. So this is Spike Lee's follow-up to Da 5 Bloods. Obviously a filmmaker that I'm very intrigued about their next project. He doesn't necessarily always hit with Oscar, but his last couple movies have had a lot of eyes on them. And I'll get to the specifics of that later, but I'm always rooting for Spike Lee, and I'm really excited that I think this one is actually an adaptation of an Akira Kurosawa film called High and Low. And so I'm really curious to see what you can do with a classic story told in a bit of a modern way, because we saw that recently with Living. Highest to Lowest is one I have a lot of respect for. And then Marty Supreme. This is Timothée Chalamet playing a famous table tennis player, directed by Josh Safdie. Don't know much about it, but I think it's going to have eyes on it because of Chalamet alone. He's quickly turning into a young DiCaprio, and so any project he's in has eyes on it. Now, some of these other films that I mentioned here, A Big, Bold, Beautiful Journey. So this is one that I'm sort of back and forth on. Some categories I have it high, others I have it low. I'm not ultimately sure what this could do, but this is a romance starring Margot Robbie and Colin Farrell, and it's described as a fantasy and is directed by Kokonada, who did After Yang. I'm always on the lookout for any filmmaker who their last film was an indie success that didn't hit with the mainstream and didn't get Oscar nominations, because those are always the ones where it's like, okay, whatever you do next, there are going to be eyes on it because of the last thing you did. And so this could potentially be a big gateway into a big award success. Begonia. Okay, this one is really tricky. I went back and forth on whether I thought this could be it, because this is Yorgos Lanthimos and Emma Stone. They've made 2 movies in the past 2 years, one of which was a big Oscar success, the other was not. And if you're going by the rule of, is it written by Tony McNamara or is it written by Lanthimos himself? No, it's written by a surprise third writer, who is a writer on Succession and The Menu. So there's some eyes on the premise of this one, by the way, is people trying to kidnap a CEO played by Stone because they believe that she's an alien. I don't know much about it. This is also a remake of an international feature, so this one could hit or miss. We've seen that the Oscars, like Weird, in moderation. They're okay with Everything Everywhere, The Substance, and Poor Things last year. They're just... I really don't know, but I'm going to say it probably is a contender. It could go either way. The Ballad of a Small Player. So this is Edward Berger's next film. And incidentally, because this is coming right off the heels of Conclave, part of me was like, do I really want to predict this one to be a contender? Because maybe it's not going to be done in time. That's the thing you always have to consider, is which of these movies are going to be ready in time, because a lot of them get postponed. But I looked at Netflix's slate, and I really think this is probably the best case scenario for them. So I think they're going to try to get it out in time. Wake Up Dead Man, speaking of Netflix, this one is the next Knives Out movie. And this is the only one that I don't think is a Best Picture contender, but I put it in for casting because it's going to have a big ensemble. And then The Lost Bus. Okay, this is a big one. This is an across-the-board movie because this one is it's Paul Greengrass, a director of Captain Phillips, who's hit a few bumps in the road, News of the World and the like, but he's directing Matthew McConaughey and America Ferrera in a film that involves a LA wildfire, not the most recent LA wildfire. It takes place in 2018, but it is a true story, and it's obviously going to be very, very timely for voters. So I think that one is going to have a lot of eyes on it. Best Animated Feature Film now. So this year does not seem to be super strong when it comes to animated contenders. The Academy in recent years have they started a trend of not giving it to the Disney Pixar movie, and so I think Laika is going to be the biggest beneficiary of that trend with their new film Wildwood, which sounds very, very interesting. I'm really looking forward to that one. I have it number 1 for now, although I don't know. With Wild Robot and Flea and Flow both doing very well last year, I don't know if Wildwood or any of these other films could get nominated outside of this category. That's just something that we're going to have to wait and see, but I don't want to jump the gun too early. Of course, Disney and Pixar are in the conversation. Pixar with Elio, which that's a movie that was supposed to come out last year and then got delayed because they realized the movie wasn't working and they needed more time to work on it. I'm glad that they gave themselves more time, but apparently people are really, really anxious about if this is going to turn out right. It was such a major overhaul at the last minute, so crossing my fingers that it ends up being good, because we need more original Disney Pixar content to do well so that they don't just make sequels. Although with that said, if there's one Disney sequel that I'm actually really looking forward to, it is Zootopia 2. Disney has not gotten on the past couple of years, but I'm really, really crossing my fingers that this is good because I love the original so much. And it's funny because the original Zootopia actually is very timely and remains timely with everything that it says about prejudice. And ideally, I would like them to delve into that a little deeper. Like in a perfect world, the movie would actually delve into like police corruption. But I don't think Disney is brave enough to do that. So I'm just going to cross my fingers and hope that Nick and Judy get together. Like, there's hundreds of fanfics online that tell you how to tell that story well. So your move, Disney. Okay, The Twits, number 4. This is a Netflix Roald Dahl adaptation. I don't know too much about it, and Roald Dahl is facing maybe a little bit of a controversy now that reports about his real-life prejudices are coming out, but I don't think that's going to be a big factor. They just gave it to Henry Sugar a few years ago, and yeah, this one does seem a little bit exciting to me. And then at number 5, I have Ne Zha 2. Oh boy. So, in case you haven't been following this story, Ne Zha 2 is the highest grossing animated movie of all time. That is not a joke. This Chinese film that came out last month, it was the sequel to another Chinese film. It made so much money, most of it in China, but when it released a little bit in some US theaters, and people who have seen it are like, this is actually really good. So I think the Academy, obviously, a lot of international voters who are going to want to respect this movie for what it did. The biggest obstacle in this movie's way is the fact that it is a sequel and the original was not nominated. But look at the competition. There's nothing really that exciting, at least that I can see, unless something comes out of nowhere. Endless Cookie is a documentary that played in Sundance that a few people liked, but I don't think it's going to have quite the passion to make it on. So as of right now, I feel fairly confident with this top 5. Best Sound. Okay, so for those of you wondering, I didn't have Wicked for Good in for casting because all of those roles were already cast for the first film. But I do think it's going to do well here. Michael, Avatar. Okay, that's a movie that a lot of people have eyes on for obvious reasons. It's not the final film in the saga. We know there's going to be more. I kind of feel like it's going to do exactly what The Way of Water did, maybe even less good. I don't know. I think it's pretty safe to get sound, visual effects, and production design that the last film got. Picture, I don't know. I kind of struggled with that, but I'll get on that later. F1, this is the Brad Pitt racing movie that is from the same director as Top Gun Maverick. A lot of people think that this could potentially get into picture as well. I'm not 100% sure. We already have some blockbuster successes between Wicked and Avatar. I don't know how many blockbusters we're going to get in Best Picture, but I think all of them seem like a safe bet for sound, and then The Lost Bus is going to be fire and destruction. Mission Impossible, I also think, is close. And then, just to mention the few films I haven't mentioned yet, Frankenstein, Del Toro telling a classic story. I think this one is going to play about equally to Nosferatu, where it doesn't really do anything above the line, but it's a contender in several below the line categories. Kiss of the Spider Woman, this is a musical with Jennifer Lopez, already premiered at Sundance to pretty strong reviews. I don't know if it's going to be a top awards contender because Wicked for Good is also a big musical there, but I think it's going to definitely place in some categories. And then Superman, I've seen some speculation that this could be Black Panther. It could be this huge, huge comic book movie that crosses over and gets into across-the-board contenders. I don't quite know if I believe that, but I've definitely got my eye on it. Best Original Song. So I talked about this last year because I thought that the Diane Warren documentary was coming out next year. It turns out it's coming out this year. And it also turns out that this documentary is not just a retrospective of her career and her work in the 80s and 90s. This movie is largely centered around the Oscar season in 2021 when she was up for Somehow You Do. And this whole entire movie is all about how much Diane Warren wants to win an Academy Award. I don't even know what to say. And I hope she wins. And maybe if she does win, then they won't nominate her anymore. But my God, the song is called Dear Me. It's like a letter to her younger self. It's like, okay, that's definitely getting in. Now she does have interesting competition in Wicked for Good, but I have noticed that since Suddenly from Les Miserables, we haven't gotten a lot of new songs from pre-existing musicals getting in. So I don't entirely know how far that this can go, but I think it's going to be either one of those two for the win. So the other songs that I have a song from The Bride. This is Maggie Gyllenhaal's musicalized adaptation of The Bride of Frankenstein. We're getting two Frankenstein movies in the same year, both from high-profile directors. And I put that one there because it's a musical. Also, After the Hunt, which is the new movie from David Lowery, starring Emily Blunt and Michaela Cole, is going to have original songs in it. And then Wildwood, I don't know for sure if that's going to have songs in it, but I wanted to have an animated movie getting an additional nomination, so I threw that there. Waiting on a Wish is one of the few songs that we've heard already, but I don't know if that's going to go all the way. And then everything else is just pure speculation on my part. For original score, this is even more speculation because with many of these scores, I don't know who's doing them. I'm just going to throw out some of the new contenders. We have After the Hunt, which is the new Luca Guadagnino film. Now, Guadagnino obviously had Challengers and Queer, and neither one got a single Oscar nomination. And I think there's going to be a lot of pressure for him to get nominated for this new movie that he's doing, After the Hunt. Unfortunately, the film is described as a thriller, and I don't think it's going to appeal to Academy voters. But this one gets a little bit of a benefit because the score is by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. And so, because people were so upset about the Challengers snub, I think there's going to be people are going to want this to be nominated for score at least. Hedda is a new adaptation of Hedda Gabler, starring Tessa Thompson, directed by Nia DaCosta, and with a score by Hildur, the woman who did Joker, whose last name I can never pronounce. So she is in the conversation always. And then The Life of Chuck. So I was really unsure what to do with Life of Chuck because obviously this movie won People's Choice at TIFF last year and then got pushed. And I don't quite know what it's going to do because I feel like very few people actually saw this movie, and of those who did, very few of them were really blown away by it. So I don't know if this is going to be an across-the-board picture contender. I'm actually thinking that because this movie has a certain set of expectations around it, because it won TIFF, it beat Anora for the TIFF People's Choice Award. When people see it in theaters, a lot of people are going to be a little bit let down. And that's just my general sense, but it also comes out in the first half of the year, and if you're a movie coming out in the first half of the year, there's going to be a lot of eyes on you, and if you And if not everyone loves you, then you may struggle to go really far. So I don't know how well Life of Chuck is going to do, and my gut says probably not that well, but I do have it popping in a few places here and there, as you'll see. For best visual effects, I have Avatar winning again. This is probably the biggest lock a year in advance you can make. Of course, Avatar is winning visual effects again. Every Avatar movie is going to win visual effects, even if the movies don't get nominated in a bunch of other categories. I have F1, I have Mission Impossible, I have Superman, which some might disagree with, but I don't really know. And then I have Fantastic Four, because Marvel, I think they like to nominate Marvel. Outside of that, I don't really know what to do. Wildwood, they nominated Kubo and the Two Strings, so it's not impossible, but I don't want to push anything. Okay, for best makeup and hairstyling, we have Michael, we have Wicked, we have Frankenstein, we have The Bride, and we have Hamnet. Yes, I have 2 Frankenstein movies nominated in makeup. I think much like the year that 2 Snow White movies were nominated for costume design, I think it's just going to play out this way because they're both going to have very showy work. I will admit, I am a little bit hesitant about how well Wicked can do in some of the craft categories if it's just going to repeat every single one of its nominations. It's not getting score again. I feel pretty confident that there's not going to be enough original music to qualify, and if there is, that's really going to piss off the Dune fans. But I don't really know. Oh, this is the first time I can talk about The Phoenician Scheme. This is the new Wes Anderson movie. And Anderson, the last couple movies he made were not Oscar nominated, but I always want to keep him in the conversation, because this one at least sounds interesting because it's a father-daughter story that's like about spies, and I really want it to be good. Benicio del Toro is in it. I'm just crossing fingers. The Toxic Avenger is that, hey, what if the Academy did something crazy thing? After The Substance, I kind of hope they don't just go back to biopics, even though I have Michael winning. So, yeah, we'll see. Costume design, let's see, I have no Snow White movie here. I thought about that one, but people don't like costumes in that movie. Although first reviews have come out and they seem to be pretty positive, so we'll see. Anyway, I do have Wicked repeating the win here, which I'm not positive about, but I think the costumes, there's going to be a lot of costumes and sets, not to spoil production design, that are going to be very showy. There's actually not as much to say about costume design. Production design, similarly, the sets are going to be very showy and Wicked. I have Avatar getting on. I think Kiss the Spider-Woman's a serious contender for production and costume design. Phoenician Scheme just missing in both. And that's kind of it. Cinematography, I don't have too much to add. I do have Nouvelle Vague. This is a Richard Linklater movie that I don't have a ton of faith in most of the categories, but it's black and white, so I think it has a reasonable chance of getting into cinematography, and it's about Jean-Luc Godard, so I think maybe that one could go decently far. Outside of that, I do have F1 as a possible contender here. I don't really know how many awards they're going to want to nominate that for, but that's the big question with that movie. I'm actually going to jump into editing because I have it in for editing, even though I don't have it in for picture, spoiler alert. I don't know, I think that can be the lone editing nomination. We get that every once in a while. Yeah, not a whole lot. Yeah, this is the part where my throat starts getting really scratchy, so... Adapted screenplay. I have One Battle After Another winning for PTA. These other movies I've talked about. Wake Up Dead Man, I do think could potentially be a lone screenplay nominee, assuming it's not in casting, because the previous 2 Benoit Blanc mysteries have gotten lone screenplay nominations, so I don't know if that one's going to go far. Oh, I don't know if I mentioned Caught Stealing yet. This is a, dang it, Darren Aronofsky. Darren Aronofsky is doing this one, which, and it's about a baseball player, and it stars Austin Butler. So, maybe, I don't know, Aronofsky can be kind of hit and miss sometimes. So, we'll see how many people really go to bat for that one. Oh! First mention of No Other Choice. Okay, gotta talk about No Other Choice. This is Park Chan-wook, who His movies have never truly hit with the Academy, but he's a South Korean filmmaker who has been really beloved for a long time. Almost got nominated for A Decision to Leave a few years ago, but ultimately didn't make the final five. Very well respected. And the movie is apparently about a person who has been laid off from his job and then takes it upon himself to kill his potential competitors for the job. So, timely, funny, satire. And let's be honest, I wanted to make a international feature, a non-English language film, a top contender. And I actually don't know about any other below the line. I don't know about any other international features. This is kind of the only one that sprang to my attention immediately. And I could be wrong, but yeah, as I'll get to later, I have it in picture because it would feel wrong to not have a non-English language film in picture at this point. I feel like you gotta have one. Maybe I could have done a little bit more research into which one, but this one seems interesting enough. And Park Chan-wook is a filmmaker that the Academy has ignored, and now they potentially have a chance to make it up to him in a big way. Original screenplay. So this could potentially be one of those years where one of the screenplay categories is a lot more competitive than the other. Adapted seems to have all the big contenders as of right now. But this does give me an opportunity to talk about some movies I haven't talked about, like Materialists. This is Celine Song's follow-up to Past Lives, starring Dakota Johnson, Chris Evans, and Pedro Pascal. So a lot of eyes are going to be on this one. It is A24, and they've fumbled a lot of movies recently, so I don't know. I think once A24 lands on a movie, they're just sort of going to... That's going to be their main contender, and they're not going to have a bunch of... They're not going to be able to push more than one thing. Because A24 has both Marty Supreme and Highest to Lowest. So Materialist, I don't know if that can get into Best Picture as well. I think 2 is their limit, and I think those two are going to be... But even then, 2 can sometimes be a lot for a studio. So unfortunately, I do think Materialist is sort of going to fall by the wayside. It might be a slightly more commercial thing too, but I hope it makes money because got 3 very big stars in it, and Celine Song, she deserves everything. Phoenician Scheme, I decided at the last minute that this would be the one nomination for that movie. Because looking at everything else, Sentimental Value, this is Joachim Trier reuniting with Renate Reinsve, might potentially be interesting. Jay Kelly is Noah Baumbach working with George Clooney as an actor, so that might be interesting. And, Untitled Kathryn Bigelow film. This is one that I considered. The reason I ultimately backed out of it... So, the screenwriter for this movie... First of all, it's a White House thriller, and I just feel like where we are now in our current political climate... We're not going to be in the mood to watch a White House thriller. There's a lot of drama coming out of there already. It's not going to hit at the right time. Plus, the screenwriter is someone who, you go to their Wikipedia and one of the first things it says is allegedly he tried to help Harvey Weinstein, and it's a whole thing. I think there's going to be a little too much scandal or controversy surrounding that one, which is a shame because Bigelow is a great filmmaker. But I don't think this is going to be her great return. I could be proven wrong. So for Best Supporting Actor, I have Colman Domingo in the number 1 position for Michael. And I haven't really talked about winners with a lot of these because I don't know if these are actually who I think is in a good position to win, or if these are just people who, I don't know, are just most likely to be nominated. But in the acting categories, I can start talking at least a little bit about wins. Domingo has been nominated twice in the past 2 years, and I think it's sort of been building up to something like this, playing Michael Jackson's father in a biopic like this. It seems like a great role, and a lot of people are really rooting for him. I also have Denzel Washington for Highest to Lowest, Benicio del Toro, Pedro Pascal, who's also having a big career moment. He's going to be so busy this year in so many things. And Mark Hamill, this is the one nomination that I have The Life of Chuck getting because he's a veteran who people are going to want to reward. Outside of that, there's not a ton of... I do really quickly want to mention Jonathan Bailey. I have at number 8. I think he came surprisingly pretty close to an Oscar nomination for the first part, and that character gets a lot more to do in the second part, so we'll see. For Best Supporting Actress, this is where I do have someone from Wicked winning. I have Ariana Grande. I think I love everything that she did in the first film so much, and I think she has so much to work with in that second movie. But Ironically, the person that she's up against is Jennifer Lopez, also a pop sensation who is in a Broadway adaptation. There's going to be a lot of eyes on both of these women. Lopez has never been nominated for, and some has said been overdue for support. I don't think that movie is going to be quite as loved as Wicked for Good, but it could be quite the interesting rivalry between the two of them. And then I have Swinton, Watson, and America Ferrera who've all been nominated before, all getting in again. Jamie Lee Curtis. Ella McKay is not a movie that I have a ton of hope for, but Lee Curtis can never be fully counted out. For lead actor, I at the moment have Chalamet in the number one position, which is weird because I just said last year that he's still young and they're going to make him wait for it. I don't really know who's going to be in the best position to win, but there's definitely going to be eyes on him to get the nomination. DiCaprio is probably in a good position to get nominated as well, and Jafar Jackson has a great career narrative there. Let's see. I do want to real quickly mention Daniel Day-Lewis for Anemone. He is making his grand return to acting, which we all knew was going to come. However, I personally was hoping that his return to acting would be a little bit more of a prestigious project, because this project is directed by his son, and they wrote it together, and it seems like a very personal, intimate father-son thing, which is perfectly lovely, but I don't know if it's going to be the best movie, and I think there's going to be so much expectation with Day-Lewis. I don't know. I feel like even if it's bad, he's going to remain in the conversation because he's Daniel Day-Lewis, but I'm somewhat doubtful that the movie can fully go all the way. I don't know if the script is going to be enough to support him, but you have to consider him. Best Actress, I ultimately chose Jessie Buckley here because I think she's going to have a really juicy role in Hamnet, but Erivo is also right there. And one thing I want to mention real quick, I've heard some people speculate about, are Erivo and Grande really going to get nominated 2 years in a row for playing the same character? Because nothing like that has ever happened before. I do think they can pull it off, but is it going to be weird for voters to be like, we got to vote for them twice? And one thing that I think they both have going for them, okay, this is weird, but I heard someone speculate, what if they restructure the movie? Because we know that Act 2 is going to get restructured a lot. What if it's restructured so that Glinda is the protagonist and that Ariana is nominated in lead and Cynthia is in supporting? So at least that way that they change it up a little bit. The fact is, I don't think that would be the dumbest idea in the world, and certainly not as dumb as calling the movie Wicked for Good, but it would at the very least allow the two of them to get nominated in different categories, which would make it feel like it's not just repeating the same thing again. But I ultimately don't think they're going to go there. And I think Ariana's getting in. I have Ariana winning. I could have Cynthia winning, but I'm not fully ready to pull that trigger. Dakota Johnson, I think we've all been waiting for her to have her Spencer-like vehicle that gets her into the Oscars because we all know she's talented. Why does she continue to do movies like Madame Web? Just get her respectable roles, please. Emma Stone, I think, is gearing up there, and I will admit, Best Actress does not seem as competitive as Best Actor this year, which is a bit of a rarity these days. But I have Margot Robbie in for A Big, Bold, Beautiful Journey. Still unsure just how well that thing is going to do overall. Jessica Lange, I know a lot of people have her in, but I feel like people have been predicting that performance to get in for years, and that movie has had such a troubled history. It keeps almost being ready to come out, and then there's so little. I feel like this one's going to disappoint a lot of people. By the way, I'm just realizing this. 3 out of my 4 predicted acting winners were nominated last year. And if I change it so Erivo is the winner, then it's 4 for 4. Losers 1 year, winners the next. I don't think that's ever happened. Just throwing that out there. But let's move on now to Best Director. So I have Paul Thomas Anderson currently winning. Not only a screenplay, but director. You may see where this is going in a second. But Anderson, even though he's considered a legend at this point, he's never actually won. He has an overdue narrative, and so there's going to be a lot of focus on this film. Even though I don't know too much about it, I know that it's covering the 60s and the Nixon era, and that there might be some stuff in that resonates with what's going on today. So But also there's Spike Lee. And I'm not going to lie, I was tempted to have Spike Lee and the film itself doing better. I've said this before, every year I'm just so upset that we have yet to see a Black Best Director winner. And I'm hoping every year that someone can remedy that. And if anyone could, it would be Spike Lee. I'm worried I just don't know enough about the movie. I don't know if it's going to fully hit. I wanted to. This is a contender that I'm really, really rooting to go far. But I don't know if I can fully commit to that yet. Chloe Zhao getting a repeat nomination. If she does get nominated, then we will officially have had 10 women nominated for Best Director. Coralie Fargeat was the 9th. Park Chan-wook, I really hope that he gets that international support. And then Edward Berger. This guy, man. He's made 2 movies that were arguably the number 2 to winning Best Picture in their respective years, but he has not been nominated for Best Director. And I hope if this movie is just as big a contender as those other ones were, then the Academy realized the error of their ways and they nominate him. John M. Chu, though, I want to have faith that he can get in. I don't know. The movie would need to be seriously contending to win picture in order for me to say that that's happening. And I just don't know if the director's branch is cool enough to do that. And that brings me at last to Best Picture of the Year. I do have Anderson winning for One Battle After Another. I've talked before about why. I was seriously debating predicting Wicked for Good. I'm obviously hugely anticipating that movie. I loved the first one so much, and I know that the second part of the story is the trickier part to adapt, but I have a lot of faith in John M. Chu. And see, the thing that's tricky is we just saw with Dune Part 2 getting much less nominations than the first one, so I wonder if it's going to be similar with a lot of the tech elements. I just don't know. Currently, if these predictions hold, then Wicked gets 8 nominations as opposed to the original's 10. Trade out the score nomination for song and get rid of visual effects and editing. See, I don't know. If I were predicting to win picture, it would need to get nominated for director and screenplay, or screenplay. I don't have it in for either. And I just don't know. Everything else, I don't think Michael is going to be in the winning conversation, but I think it's going to get nominated. Hamnet, have to wait and see. Same thing with Highest to Lowest. A lot of these are just pure speculation that we don't know much about. This time last year, I was highlighting the Nicole Kidman movie Holland, which is coming out later this month, which I was a background actor in. And even though I loved doing that movie, and I talked in the video about wanting to be a spokesperson for that movie, a cheerleader, wanting the movie to do really well, now that we've gotten some early reviews, it seems like it's not bad, but it's weird and it's divisive, and it's an early year release thriller. So probably not the sort of thing that's going to be an awards player, although I am definitely looking forward to seeing it, and I would love to be proven wrong. It's kind of hard. This was my very first time on a film set, and it was such a glorious experience, and so I just hope the movie is good, and if it manages to be a part of some awards conversation, then that's just icing on the cake. Sadly, they do not have an award for Best Extra. So yeah, looking at this list, I really don't know. I think I talked about everything, why I have all of these as potential contenders. There are some really, really exciting movies that are in consideration this year. Hopefully this is going to be a better year than last year was. There were some good winners, but yeah, I think this Best Picture lineup could potentially be really, really exciting. So that's all I have to say for now. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care.